Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us for the third webinar in the Clubhouse Development webinar series. If you didn't have a chance to watch the previous two webinars, you can find them on the web platform that Cogeo has created specifically for Georgia Soccer, and that will be linked in our follow-up email. And if you have any questions throughout this webinar, please feel free to use the GoToWebinar tool, and we'll review those after the presentation. First, I'll introduce you to who we are. Cogeo is the leading expert in the sports nonprofit industry. Our management team has 50 years of fundraising experience and has raised over $650 million for more than 150 nonprofit organizations. And one key reason that we're passionate about working with sports organizations and specifically soccer clubs like yourselves is that our leadership both played and coached soccer. And that includes your speaker today, Rob Cusell. Rob was a college All-American during his playing days at Williams College and coached the Napa United U16 girls to a win at the 2012 NorCal State Premier Cup. Currently, he is the Managing Director of Consulting Services at Cogeo and has helped hundreds of sports organizations implement strong organizational development and fundraising strategies. And with that, I will pass it over to Rob.
Thanks, Mel. So the third slide, hello everybody, the third slide is what we're going to be discussing today, really, which is number 3, webinar 3, which is event fundraising for clubs and academies. Third of 8 webinars. The next slide provide you goals and context for today. Event can be a cornerstone to clubs for fundraising, and certainly there are best practices to make sure that the event is sustainable and it's actually making money. We're going to talk about how events are a cornerstone of fundraising, and then we'll close with data, how clean and organized data and systems can really help you become efficient and sustainable over the future. The next slide, again, is a demonstration of the House of Development. We talked about engaging your membership in the first webinar, through PR, website development, email marketing, push-pull strategies. And then last month, we talked about annual and membership giving. And today, we're going to look at events and what is meaningful in terms of the types of events you might want to consider or build on if you're already doing it, as well as the concept of cultivation event as it relates to major gifts in general. So again, mostly this is retail, so it's unrestricted giving, and that's really important. That way the organization can do what it feels should be doing with the money that's raised through the events. On the other hand, we've seen targeted events for a particular area within the club, namely financial aid or professional development for coaches. And then events obviously can be helpful in terms of capital campaign build-outs. We'll talk specifically. So the next slide, what types of events are out there currently? Well, there are about 8 types really that we've identified, right? They're galas and signature events, mostly in the evening or the afternoon, sit-down meal, and generally has auctions and silent auctions and all sorts of fancy stuff, raffles attached as well. Another type we see are breakfast, which is really just a call to action. So an hour-long event where you're raising money on the spot. Third type are fun run, walkathons, those types of events. And we're going to talk specifically about a soccer-thon and what that looks like and how it can be effective for a soccer club or academy. We see a lot of golf tournaments where there's a member within the club who wants to host, or a couple of members who want to host a golf tournament. And those are fine, as long as there's no overhead taken on by the club, as well as the volunteers do all the work. But there's no stress on club administration or anybody. It's really all volunteer driven. So we're fine with golf tournaments. They actually raise money, but they have to be fully volunteer driven. Cultivation events, I'm going to touch on specifically a little bit later. Open house events, those are especially effective for field build-outs, particularly if you have a clubhouse within the complex or facility. And then a campaign launch event, If you're in a campaign, make sure that you've got a launch event that'll really help. And then campaign, if you're in a capital campaign, you also want to have a completion event to celebrate in terms of the actual monetary celebration, the accomplishment of raising the fund. So the next slide really looks at why are they important? Why should you consider an event or keep doing the event or events that you're doing as long as a return on investment is adequate? What do? They do a lot of good things. Public awareness. It raises public awareness of the organization and the mission of the organization. It can attract new members, board member. It's a great way to cultivate new board members. It can attract incremental new donors. And then you have increased data from the fact that they attended. Great way to cultivate current, new, and potential members, donors. And then you've got volunteer participation. It can help meet the overall budgetary needs of the club, the academy. You can raise incremental money that was not there prior. And if in fact you're changing your dynamics or you've merged with another club, which we're seeing a lot of mergers now, this is a great way to present the new image, the new face of the entity. It's a great way to do internal community building within the club, people working together toward a common goal, and then external community building as well. And you can enhance the partnerships that you've developed by exposing them at the event, giving them visibility at the event. And then it can help you advance your marketing and PR as well. And most importantly, if you do an annual event, it's an opportunity to honor, thank, and recognize key volunteers or donors or both. And then, of course, finally, there's a social component. Now, to be sure, with the pandemic, a lot of this has been challenging. And what we're seeing is obviously virtual events or outdoor events with social distancing. Although there are restrictions in states now in terms of maximum number of individuals that can get together. The good news is, as of yesterday, the vaccine is being rolled out. All this will become relevant, hopefully by late spring, summer. The next slide. Why are they challenging? And again, I'm going to be candid here in that we see a lot of organizations, clubs, who are doing events, yet they're not raising much. And it takes a lot of resources, a lot of time, and energy and volunteers to raise very little. So that's troubling. But why are they challenging? Well, you've got to have the right timing. You have the right resources allocated to make sure that it's successful. The proper leadership to pull it off. If it's a big event, such as a walkathon, or you've got to have volunteer training and management. There's going to be solicitations made. That takes work. Invitations, whom to invite, etc. What's the event budget? It needs to have its own unique budget. There needs to be record keeping. Make sure that it's included in your CRM database if you've got one. And then what's the decision-making structure? Because generally they're volunteer-driven, you still have to have a good, strong decision-making structure so that communication can flow appropriately, either horizontally or up and down vertically. Donor volunteer recognition has to be done well. It can't just be done in an ad hoc manner. It has to be formalized. And then how does the event play into overall strategic planning and goal setting? And then is the event properly sustainable over time? And that's really important. What you don't want to do is throw spaghetti at the wall and do an event off the cuff because a parent member has an idea. The only way that can work is, again, just like the golf tournament that I mentioned earlier, as long as they handle all the work, all the resources, and see it through according to your directives, then you're in good shape. But just be careful in terms of taking on new events and new responsibilities around events. The next slide, pretty funny. In short, are events worth your time, or are you having too many events, right? And again, you need to be super objective here in terms of understanding whether or not the time that was spent was worth what you got out of the event. In other words, if in fact the goal for the event was to make a lot of friends, well, did you make a lot of new friends? If the goal of the event was to raise $25,000, well, was that raised, and what did it take to raise that amount? You have to have a tangible goal, and you really need to evaluate whether or not you achieve that tangible goal. So this is an interesting slide, the next slide, number 10, because really 82% of 501c3s, so 8 out of 10, more than 8 out of 10, host something. And it can actually generate significant revenue for social impact organizations, but they often require more time and more energy. And here you've got the ease of planning, which is your y-axis, and then how much revenue, return on investment, in other words, and it's pretty much all over the map in terms of one, ease of planning, from very difficult at the bottom to easy, and you can see there was quite a range, as well as the actual income raised, also a range. So the point of this graph is that there's no magical formula. You have to keep assessing if you're doing an event or events. You have to keep assessing whether it's working. You have to assess whether it met your goals in terms of what you were trying to accomplish. And you have to be absolutely honest with yourself in terms of evaluating the actual performance of the event as it related, again, to the stated goals. And this is the one area we find that there's a lot of difficulty in terms of self-assessment. And what we see, unfortunately, is a continuation of events that really should not occur, aren't productive, don't have the return on investment that they really should, and therefore should potentially be discontinued. And it's not uncommon for us as a company, Cogeo, once we do an audit before going to work with a partner client, to make recommendation on either shifting the event, considering abandoning the event, transforming the event, merging events, and so that's really important. Self-assessment is not easy. Being objective about oneself is oftentimes difficult, but in the area of events, as it relates to fundraising and return on investment, it is absolutely critical that you self-assess and do it in a very honest fashion. So the next slide really looks at 3 areas. And we've got an entire document, and if you're interested in getting that, just email Mel directly, but we've got a full binder that really goes into great depth into these 3 areas, which, no surprise, there's the event preparation phase, the actual execution of the event, and then most importantly, as I just narrated, the event evaluation phase. So in terms of the preparation phase, there are 4 key areas that you need to assess and understand. Is there strong organized leadership? Is the team really committed? Do you have committed donors, sponsors, and underwriters for the event? Do you have a slate of committed volunteers? And are you capable of managing all of the data which the event will undoubtedly yield? And those areas, those 4 areas, need to be absolutely in great shape for events to be really optimal and successful. In terms of execution, there should be detailed schedule, and if there are speakers and things happening around that, there should be formal scripts. The best events we see, those breakfast events I described in the morning, it's not unusual if there are clients to mandate that if there are guest speakers that they actually practice prior with staff, with the administrative staff from the client, and to ensure that it's absolutely perfect. So practicing is good, scripting is essential. And then in terms of the execution, what kind of donor and volunteer recognition will exist, and how does that look? Is it going to be digitally produced? Is it going to be in person? All those things need to be understood. And then the most important part, which is the evaluation. How did the event do? Evaluate your donor stewardship. So how are you thanking donors and volunteers? Make sure that you have as many people, all of the volunteers, anybody who was involved with the event should be provided with an event evaluation form that essentially gets their input on how they felt the event went across a number of areas. And then that data needs to be collected and then it needs to be analyzed and reported back to anybody who is involved, so that again it can improve from year to year, and you can understand where there may have been gaps and where there may be some areas for improvement. And that's really important. Okay, now we're going to look specifically at two types of events. One is agency-wide, and then the other is more focused on major donors and corporate donors, as well as foundation reps. So the next slide, which is number 12, is a soccerthon. Now, this is Villarreal, Nebraska. We actually set this up in February of this year, 2020, and then boom, the pandemic hit. So it never happened, unfortunately. And as a matter of fact, we had queued up something like 6 or 7 soccerthons for last spring, early summer, all of which were canceled. The latest we just had to cancel again, this was Clarksville Soccer Club in Tennessee. They were due to have it in December next week, but again, with the state mandates that it just went down, and even national mandates, we've had to postpone that one as well. So what is a soccerthon? It's a great event, potentially. Now, let me say this, from an organizational standpoint, it's really important that it be from the bottom up. And so what is it? It's really just the concept of players and teams committed to playing for a certain number of hours and then raising money from friends and family at a certain rate per hour. So if a player, say, commits to playing 2 hours over the course of the 14-hour soccerthon, and think multiple small fields, indoors, outdoors, or both, and essentially run by volunteers. But if a player commits to 2 hours and say at a rate of $10 per hour against 20 sponsors, well, that player herself will have raised $200 per hour. And that's just one player. And so you do the multiplying effect over 14 hours of several hundred players, it can be very, very powerful. But in terms of organization, it can't be top down. What cannot happen is for the executive director or the director of coaching just announcing, hey, we're having a soccerthon and here's how you sign up. That doesn't work. That's what we found out in our experience. The only way this works is if there is complete buy-in from the team managers, most importantly, the team captain, the players, because their peer influence will impact their ability to recruit other players and convince them that this is a worthy initiative to give back to the community and to understand themselves what it's like to raise money. And then the coaches, most importantly, where the coaches have to incentivize their teams to participate and do as best as possible. And we also recommend putting a coaches team together and having the coaches also raise funds so that the kids themselves see that the coaches are doing it, and then you pit two coaching, you can do all sorts of stuff with that. And the idea is to do this either indoors or outdoors for, like I said, 12 to 14 hours over the course of a day or 2 days over a weekend. And it really works in terms of making sure that everybody has a good time. 2, that it's mission-centric, right? It's about the game. And 3, money's raised, significant money's raised in that context. And here's the good news. Whereas 10 years ago, this was a massive paper trail in terms of trying to actually get the checks written and then bring them in. All of this now is done online. We've got systems where we incorporate that into our clients, and you can see the back office here for Villarreal, Nebraska, Lincoln. So that's a soccerthon. Another one that we like is basically golf soccer. So you set up a course, and again, in this case, it's much like mini golf. There's a simple entry fee. So it might be $50 a family or whatever it is. You just go to the local mini golf course and figure out what the fee is there and make that the fee. And just offer it up for Saturday afternoon. And then we did this with our client in Springfield, Missouri, and it worked really well. It was, they didn't raise a lot of money, but certainly it wasn't much work putting it together. And that can be highly entertaining. And again, very mission-centric and specific. These are good for retail, getting a lot of people involved. So it does a lot of the stuff that we talked about in the previous slide in terms of engaging the community and increasing awareness about the club and its work in the community, because each of the players will actually reach out to immediate family, extended family, friends, vendors, work parents, workmates, etc. So that then creates the kind of awareness and increased visibility that you really want. And it brings in incremental donors through having the kids raise the funds. So there's a lot of positives here potentially. But again, I'm going to stress again repeatedly, the only way this will work, the only way you'll get the proper traction is that you have those individuals who are leaders on each of the teams dedicate themselves to this, namely team managers, coaches, the assistant coaches, and most importantly, the captain have to buy into this. The next slide looks at a case study for one of our clients. This was San Francisco Elite Academy in the Bay Area. And it's the city of San Francisco. It's the first academy team. They're a really good club, and they've produced some really good teams over the years. They're a young club. They were founded 6 years ago, so we helped them from the get-go in terms of implementing a robust fundraising program right from the start of their journey, because the one thing that they knew was that there was flight away from San Francisco to out of the city of San Francisco, because there wasn't really a good team at that time. And they also knew that many of the top players couldn't afford the pay-to-play model. There are several areas in San Francisco where it's not high rent at all. And that's where a lot of the really strong players live and play, in the streets and stuff. And so what they committed to was having a really robust financial aid program, not a scholarship program, because it's not merit-based, it's literally need-based. Really strong financial aid program so that any deserving player who had the skill, the capability, the willingness to play would be afforded the opportunity. And this included not just dues, but also travel, equipment, and any other expenses that they may incur. So that's really, really important. So we established a very strong major gifts program, which included hosting, I think in 1 year we did up to 6 cultivation events. And what is a cultivation event? It's a highly effective way to engage donors of higher capacity about the club, its mission, and its strategic imperatives moving forward. So how does it work? You essentially, you identify 1 or 2 individuals within your membership who may have a lovely home, are very social, and really support the club and its mission and its work. And you explain to them the concept of opening up their home to up to 20 individuals that you'll help identify. They may have some individuals, couples, or whomever in mind as well. And it's really picking a date and then doing the event itself. And so what does that look like? Well, the messaging for the invitee is, join us to hear about the plans for the so-and-so club moving forward. Please join us for a reception at so-and-so's house, such date. We've been doing these virtually using WebEx or Zoom. It's been great because people are looking for things to do. And so these actually work really well virtually, ironically. So this is something we've been able to sustain with our clients despite the pandemic. And so what does the event look like? Well, it's, think of the host, the technical director and the executive director are there, maybe have a player or a coach, if they're type A, if they've got good personalities. And then the guests are there. 15 minutes in, the hosts explain why they're happy to host the event and why they're very happy with the club and its performance. And then they introduce the two speakers who might be the executive director and the technical director. That's what we did here with San Francisco Elite Academy. And they essentially explained the mission and why they were raising significant funds for financial aid to ensure economic access for those disadvantaged, and really stayed strong on message, which we scripted them. Basically, it was a communication about why they were raising funds for financial aid, how important it was for the culture of the club, and they were really looking forward to following up with each of the invitees with a subsequent meeting so they could discuss more specifically what the path forward would be and how they might be engaged in the process. And it's really just that. It's just messaging out, and then importantly, following up afterwards with each of the invitees to see how they might want to get involved, given what they heard or not. The short term, there were gifts of all sizes that came in, depending on capacity and willingness. But one thing that did occur, unbeknownst to us at the time, there was a current parent who also were able to set up a rather large foundation, whose sole purpose was to enable economically disadvantaged kids to access services. And so it was a perfect fit in terms of their foundation. And we did some negotiating, and we were able to raise $500,000 with a 5-year pledge for financial aid programs, which really transformed the Elite Academy's budget, right? Because they hadn't budgeted that at all. So they were able to take $100,000 from another area and dedicate that to coaching salaries, which is why they've got essentially all the top coaches in the city now, which has really impacted their performance in terms of winning and performing at the highest level, as well as producing higher caliber student athletes for the next stage of their career. So they've seen all sorts of really strong benefits. And the idea has been to, and we've helped them do this, really steward this $100,000 a year. It comes every January. Their third payment is going to come this January 2021. So they're in year 3 now. And then in year 5, we've done a great job stewarding the $100,000 each year, a really good job. And the idea is in year 5 to go back to the foundation and have them reconsider a similar grant, which hopefully they'll do. And that literally was just the direct result of this couple attending a cultivation event, hearing more specifically about what was happening, and then that occurred. So that was a transformational gift. In all, though, they're averaging about $250,000 a year now through our systems and implementing the program, which has really helped them. So the final part of this webinar, we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about leveraging technology. There's so much technology out there, and really we're going to look at four specific areas, which is registration, what tools are out there for that, email, how can you manage all the email more efficiently beyond just Gmail, and then social media scheduling, namely HubSpot and Smarter Queue, and then briefly discuss a posting plan as well. What's a media kit? What does that look like from a social media? So for event registration, you probably know about Facebook events. You can have people sign up through the Facebook platform with no need to leave. And GoToWebinar, obviously everybody knows, and then Zoom, everybody knows about as well. Eventbrite is probably the easiest way to collect registration payments, and it integrates really well with the other systems that I just described. For email, HubSpot is robust. We talk about it a lot because you can do so much in one area, one place. You can do email, social media, landing pages, forums, CRM, CMS, and on. But there are easier platforms. MailChimp is one. It's probably the tool we use most often. It's clean, really simple interface, and it gives good analytics on open rate, click rate, and all the values. So those would be. Active Campaign is also a good tool. In terms of scheduling for social media, again, HubSpot, really easy for event promotion. Campaigns can be created on the fly, and then you can see the results of all the actions from that campaign in one space, not just social or email. One thing with HubSpot is you can't really set a posting schedule and then just queue up the posts. There has to be a specific date and time. So Smarter Queue could be a good option so that you can easily post more batches. And then a posting plan sounds like a lot of work, but doesn't have to be. You can do it all in terms of introduction of the speaker for whatever event. You can do it by email, but you can also do it on social media. And then finally, in terms of the media kit, obviously the more people that are involved, the bigger the audience, particularly if you have to promote your partners. So basically, we recommend just a universal event graphic that's sent out to any relevant entities as it relates to the event. You can also leverage technology to evaluate the event, to get feedback, to do analytics, as we just briefly discussed, and then for continual improvement points. SurveyMonkey, I think, is very well known. Lots of survey tools there. It's probably one of the most easiest, and it's got, let's call it industry credibility, therefore people will actually use it. Analytics, again, HubSpot is good for that. And Everwall is a great way to track hashtags in particular, if that's what your goal is in terms of event, which is going to be more and more relevant as things are going virtual. So this, if you're going to really track all this data, make sure you're tracking it so that it really benefits you and the agency and the club. That way you'll improve your return on investment, you'll understand where there are stress points, and then you'll make intelligent tactical changes to the future events and their makeup, as well as how the delivery systems work and then the back-end systems. Again, technology is constantly evolving, so the key, I guess, is to keep up and find the best environment for yourself in terms of that. But I think that's it, Mel, for today. Thank you, everyone, and I'll let Mel close it out.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for your time, and thanks for everybody for joining us. You'll hear from the Georgia Soccer Group with the link to the webinar and to the Cogeo platform that will contain additional resources and an easy access to Cogeo. So if you have any questions, please follow up with us there. Okay, thank you, everybody. Have a great day.